Welcome to Driven. I'm your host, Paul Perrone. We're going to learn and talk about AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. Check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. So kick back or buckle up and become driven. Welcome to episode 5 of Driven. This is an informational episode, also a topical one that's relevant for industry. I really think this could be an industry-defining moment. And the topic is the Cruise AV Pedestrian Incident. This is an incident that took place October 2nd of this year. Just a few parameters for this discussion. First and foremost, there's empathy, of course, for the victim who was involved in this incident. It was a traumatic experience. As of this recording, in serious condition, and our thoughts and prayers are with them. We, in this episode, want to look at really what happened, look at how we can mitigate and fix these kinds of issues. We're not going to be playing, any sort of Monday morning quarterback here, but we'll be looking at what happened and how we can fix these kinds of problems. First is really just, again, what happened. On October 2nd, 2023, at about 9:30 p.m. in San Francisco, California, the intersection of 5th Street and Market, another car hit a pedestrian, a human-driven vehicle. The pedestrian was launched, per the reports, into the air in front of a Cruise autonomous vehicle that was traveling in another lane. The Cruise vehicle stopped, but it stopped too late, collided with the individual, and unfortunately, the vehicle subsequently proceeded to pull to the side of the road and drag the person under the car. The person was stuck underneath the car. This was a horrible experience, traumatic, and very, just unpleasant to think about. But we want to talk about the sequence of events in a little more detail here, first and foremost. First, there were two vehicles simultaneously driving down Market Street in San Francisco, approaching an intersection at 5th Street. They were roughly aligned side by side, according to DMV reports and the reports that we've seen to date, in two adjacent lanes, traveling in the same direction. And as seen from above, there was a darker vehicle being driven by a human, occupying the left lane, while a Cruise autonomous vehicle was in the right lane, also driving in parallel towards the intersection, adjacent, closer to a curb. A pedestrian was crossing 5th Street, intersecting Market Street, on which the vehicles were traveling, utilizing, I believe from the reports, a crosswalk. And according to the reports from Cruise, I believe the pedestrian had stepped out onto the crosswalk after the signal transitioned from red to green. So they were crossing the road while the vehicles on Market Street had a green light. So simultaneously, both vehicles are increasing their speed as they enter the intersection. And it's plausible, based on these event descriptions, that the Cruise vehicle was lagging behind the other vehicle. Cruise reports that the pedestrian began crossing at the crosswalk, following the change of the traffic signal, moving ahead of the Cruise vehicle, and then stopping in the lane of the other vehicle. And then the other driver in the other vehicle, maybe assuming the pedestrian would continue, didn't reduce their speed. Unfortunately, the pedestrian was then struck by the other vehicle. According to the reports from Cruise, the impact caused the pedestrian to be propelled or launched back into the lane where the Cruise vehicle was traveling. The other vehicle just apparently took off. It was a hit and run. The Cruise vehicle, however, autonomously applied the brakes hard in response to the appearance of this pedestrian suddenly in their lane. Again, this was a fully autonomous vehicle, a driverless vehicle. But the Cruise vehicle was moving at a speed that led it to collide with the pedestrian, nevertheless. At some point, the cruise vehicle stopped, but at this point, apparently the pedestrian was pinned beneath the vehicle. Somehow had gotten under the vehicle during this event. And following the halt after the collision, the cruise vehicle resumed motion to engage in sort of a minimum risk condition situation, according to its program, to pull over to the side of the road. Now, this is where the pedestrian, still pinned underneath, was pulled approximately, I think it was 20 feet roughly, at speeds reaching about 7 miles per hour, as the cruise vehicle pulled over to the side of the road, eventually stopping with the individual's feet or legs caught beneath the rear axle. They were visible from some images that were taken sticking out from underneath the car. The individual was reportedly screaming, and it was just a terrible situation. Emergency personnel came to respond. There were witnesses and people with the victim at the time. So, that was the sequence of events. What about this was hard? Some people might ask. Well, one has to imagine the scenario of a human being really getting run over and pinned beneath a vehicle, and then the vehicle being aware of that situation. We may think in retrospect of this scenario that it was something that should have been conceived of, and maybe somewhere along the lines it was. But it's very difficult to think through all of these different scenarios and possible combinations of things that can happen. But what are some of the faults that can occur, errors that can occur in this situation? Maybe there was something that was programmed to deal with this situation, but due to a fault and an error in software or hardware, it wasn't able to do so. We don't know. There are no reports that I've seen yet of a sort of a failure of any sorts that of hardware or software that was supposed to deal with the situation that didn't. But of course, that's one possible situation. When we look at detection methods, typical detection scenarios are where you're looking for objects ahead of the vehicle. In this case, if the cruise vehicle was indeed traveling behind but adjacent to the vehicle to its left that collided initially with the pedestrian, the sensors may have been eclipsed. You're looking over a hood or over the roof, and might not see this other this collision happening, might not have been aware of it, and the sensors may have not been programmed to be looking in some sort of wider field of view at the entire crosswalk path. And even if it did, again, if the pedestrian had walked past what it was able to see because it was eclipsed by the other vehicle, then they wouldn't have noticed that the individual was even still in the crosswalk, right? So there's also maneuver reactions. Once you see a pedestrian, and if it looks as if it leapt out in front of a car, hard braking would occur based on some sort of sudden appearance of an object. It could be a deer, it could be a human being, it could be anything. And it seems as if the cruise vehicle, according to the reports, did apply braking hard after it saw the pedestrian in its path. These would be typical reactions of maneuvers. There's no knowledge yet as to whether there was a recording of the fact that it hit a person or hit an object and that it went under the car. If it just disappeared, the system theoretically, right, should ask, and again, this is not Monday morning quarterbacking, but just thinking through what can be done. Where did it go? What happened? So that's, another problem that could have arisen, that may have lost track of where this pedestrian went and just assumed it was out of its way. And then there's fail-safe reactions. The minimum risk conditions or reactions might be to pull over to the side of the road, as was the case with the cruise vehicle, or should it just, stop? In this case, the vehicle pulled over. We also don't yet know from reports whether there was remote teleoperation from someone at Central involved with sort of assessing the situation and then commanding the vehicle to move over after the event. That's, a possibility. When we start thinking about what could be some of the mitigating solutions for these problems, and one aspect of this is a wider detection field of view. Can we be adding more sensors to look over the hoods and roofs of other vehicles if needed, to look for things outside of the direct path? If a pedestrian is in a crosswalk, regardless of any situation, should the vehicle slow down and wait and not proceed? Of course, the con with that is people behind you, people behind the autonomous vehicle in a city that are driving are going to be beeping, may get aggressive. It makes certainly a city-born robo-taxi AV solution a problem, right? It's a problem to operate in such environments because of the congestion, the traffic congestion, and the trade-offs that are made, right? And should there be a rule of thumb that if there's somebody, you detect a pedestrian in the road at all, of course, stop, slow down and be ready. Again, you have to look at the side effects of false positives, where if you incorrectly, detect that there's someone there that isn't, and the vehicle's slowing down, that can actually lead to unsafe situations if, again, the people behind you are, driving aggressively, or if you're suddenly stopping, you can induce a collision from behind. And apparently, according to other reports, that has been happening a few times with the cruise vehicles in San Francisco, that they've stopped and there have been some collisions from the rear. I don't know how severe they have been. They might have been just minor bumps, but that has been happening as well. So there's this fine line to walk between detecting and reacting and overreacting and stopping, and both situations can lead to unsafe scenarios. Then there's the concept of remembering what happened. The maneuver in this case, the cruise vehicle, once it saw the pedestrian, seemed to react appropriately. According to the reports, it applied brakes as hard as it could when it saw the object in front. But the question is, should it, was there any way to apply the brakes sooner in time, right? But then there's the concept of, if this human being disappears from your field of view, and you don't see it there, what should you do? Should we, maybe recording the situation where you can't see what was hit after it was hit, and if it disappeared, this is an anomaly, and maybe consider what the minimal risk response, mitigation response should be at that point. Should it just be to stop, and or are you required to pull over to the side of the road? And if so, there's some other things that have to be done. One of which might be to look underneath the vehicle, having sensors now under the vehicle to detect if there's someone or something underneath the vehicle. This is, a relatively new thing. I'm not sure of any company that's doing this. There might be, but the question is, are you going to be adding LiDAR and cameras and other sensors of sorts underneath the vehicle to detect such situations? Fail stop versus fail op. Fail stop means to stop the vehicle. Don't move forward any further. Now, that's not good for a busy road like the 101 in San Francisco, or I-95 on the East Coast. Might not be good for San Francisco streets to just suddenly, to stop and sit there. Presumably you would stop and put on flashers and special emergency lights, maybe above and beyond the typical hazard lights that are on vehicles? Or do you, again, pull over to the side of the road? And I would think of that sort of fail operational maneuver, right? To still operate after a failure and pull over to the side of the road. And again, if you're operating and pulling over to the side of the road, there's going to need to be some hazard analysis and V&V to verify and validate that that is a correct and complete operation, right? Now, Cruise and a lot of other autonomous vehicle companies use machine learning via neural networks to train on scenarios for detecting objects and perceiving objects in the world, and even for engaging in certain maneuver reactions. There's a link to an article on Medium from Cruise itself about their continuous learning methodologies and how they do this. If you're interested, I posted that link to the driven.show website, and also try to post it to YouTube and other streaming services where this is operating. Now, one of the things that Cruise does is for edge cases, or what they call long tail events, according to their publication in Medium, is that they try to also automate the identification of the deviations from the neural network model as errors. So I think one of the examples they give is a U-turn in the middle of a road. That's an anomaly, a situation. If the car in front of you is suddenly doing an illegal U-turn in front of you in the road, and they're in the right lane and you're traveling in the left lane, you want to slow down and deal with that, detect that. So they label those situations and then predict the path of the possible collision, and let the avoidance maneuver algorithms consider and respond to that appropriately. Now, the long tails from at least the article that is referenced are seemingly generated from real-world data collection in the city, situations that the vehicles that they were operating have actually encountered. The problem is you won't typically encounter a situation such as a car colliding with a person, that person being jettisoned or launched into the lane of your vehicle, and then having the situation where you're colliding with that human being and running over that human being. Even if you have simulation situations, you might not be able to, or you might not model this specific situation. You might not think of it. Although you may increase your chance of doing so, it depends on the simulation setup and the hazards analyses that are performed to generate these scenarios. There's a fundamental problem, I believe, though, with neural networks, and I've been studying neural networks since the 90s, really, and I'm not opposed to use of them, but the question is how to use them appropriately. But neural networks are based on probabilistic predictive machinery, so to speak. The training encounters are probabilistic. The calculations for its response based on inputs are all performed inside of a black box, i.e. the deep network, the neural network, where you're training the neural network to respond to different scenarios and situations based on inputs. And you can train and test it in a specific environment and simulate it for a while and gain some comfort in the results, but leveraging these networks in new environments or new situations to make real-time, safety critical decisions is going to continue to be problematic unless there's really some method employed to do real-time verification and validation. With the method of real-time verification and validation itself having been verified and validated, right, proven and certified to be correct, right? So San Francisco is a complex operational design domain, or ODD, as we refer to it. The fact is, there will be many more encounters that can't be predicted. There are a lot of unknowns in some of these environments. For example, what if the person lands on the roof or the hood of the car? What happens there? I've heard people say, well, if there's an infant in the road, are you going to detect that? Are the detection algorithms going to detect this? What would be a very unusual situation and respond? Or if there's a tumbleweed in the road, is the vehicle going to just drive through it, or is it going to stop for it? If there's a live power line waving in the wind, obviously some of these are extreme oddball situations until they become events, right? That then people say, wow, this has happened, and how can we build the vehicles to be robust and responsive to all that? And I think it's important that while we're still dealing with these edge cases, that companies, perhaps like Cruise and others, put safety stewards back in the environment. Safety stewards are people who sit in the front seat of the vehicle and monitor the environment. In many cases, there are concierges. They're talking to people who are in the being driven and telling them what's going on, especially as this technology is new. But they're also there to take control during encounters such as these edge case conditions that the vehicles may or may not have been designed to handle. The other solution to consider is, can we just fail stop? I think if we can't just stop and not move forward, then maybe it's also not an environment where you should not have a safety steward on board. Another thing is there's an opportunity here for what we call safety watchdogs. These are independent systems that are monitoring the autonomous drive system that can be designed in a simple fashion or a simpler fashion. They're deterministic versus probabilistic. They're more verifiable and validatable. You have more of a chance of guaranteeing that they're correct and complete, at least in terms of their safety checking rules and methodologies for verifying in real time that the autonomous drive system is operating correctly. Again, I'm going to cover this in more depth in a future episode, and I'll provide another link on the driven.show website to some slides and maybe a paper about this methodology. Of course, last but not least is to just think about, as we move forward with autonomy, and there's more autonomy. In fact, if there's autonomy everywhere in a certain operational design domain or environment, the question is, what if all the vehicles were autonomous? What if the other vehicle that collided with this person itself was autonomous, or certainly had a level of ADAS, advanced driver assistance, and collision avoidance? Would there have been an accident to begin with, right? Presumably the vehicle would have stopped, right? And this marches towards the vision of 100% accident-free mobility for all, everywhere, at all times. And that's of course, that's the ultimate goal for employing autonomous driving across a wide variety of applications and conditions. So I hope you've gotten something from this episode. I think we've certainly talked about the sequence of events that people might not be 100% clear as to exactly what happened, and some of the things that could have gone wrong or could be going wrong in these situations, and how we might mitigate these situations in the future. So thank you. See you next time. I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web, and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.